and welcome to 30 Days of Hoya. Today we will talk about hoyabella. You can see a better view of the bella in the second frame, and it's actually in bloom now, which I am very glad about. Hoyabella is native to South and Southeast Asia, to places like India, Myanmar and Thailand. This is a cool-growing Hoya, so temperatures from 10 to 25 degrees of Celsius or from 50 to 80 degrees of Fahrenheit will do well for this Hoya. This just means this Hoya will do well if you have a slightly cooler home, so you will not have any problems with that. And I actually never noticed that this Hoya is bothered by higher temperatures as well. I kept my hoyabella, and I still do, keep it at around 23 degrees of Celsius, and it is quite fine. It doesn't have any problem blooming or growing, and I think it looks okay. The larger Hoya that you can see is actually the one I purchased last year. It was in a trellis, so removing it from the trellis was a bit difficult. This is the second hoyabella, and it is smaller, but be mindful that this was just a very small cutting last year. I'm very sad it's not in bloom now, but it did produce several peduncles and they did bloom. And the Hoya that you can see that is rooted now in semi-hydroponics is actually a cutting from the larger one that I got. When I was removing it from the trellis, I did break some of the vines, so I just rooted them in water and placed them in semi-hydroponics because I wanted to try that experiment. And it is growing really well. It still didn't bloom. You can see that some of the foliage is light green color, and this is due to the light. I did move it now, but it still has that lighter foliage that remained from when it was sitting under the light. In the second frame, you can also see a part of the larger bella, and it is showing some light stress on the leaves. So you can see that the middle vein there is red. So not the entire leaf will get red, but just that middle vein will get red. This bella did spend a couple of weeks outside, but I had to bring it back in because the place where I put it just receives too much light. Even though it is in kind of a shade, it's still too much for this plant, and I don't have a shadier place for it, at least not outside. So now it is hanging in my northwest facing window, and it does look a bit unruly. It was on the trellis, and I keep cutting it back and rooting it again. I'm trying to form a shape that will not be so offensive when it's hanging. You can actually see it's quite a large plant, and it grows rather fast for me, but the way this previously grew in a trellis is just not something that works well in this particular hanging basket, but I'm hoping that I will be able to shape it somehow so it looks a bit prettier. In terms of light, this is really not a Hoya for high light. It will do much better in less intensive light. The leaves will stay prettier and they will remain green. What I mean by less light is that I think this one can grow really well in northwest, northeast window. And if you have east window, I think you can actually pull it back a bit. I don't think this one would mind too much. It may grow a little bit slower, but I think it will still do fine. It does grow a little bit faster when it gets more light, but for me it is still a challenge to find the right amount of light where it will grow fast and not get burned. Hoyabella really likes a lot of water. I made a mistake of putting it in terracotta, especially this one, the first one that I rooted, and it did not enjoy that. It looked dehydrated most of the time, and I also made a mistake with the mix. The mix was too well draining and I would have to water it all the time. So I did change a few things there. I put it in plastic pot, and the mix is a little bit different than for other of my Hoyas. I would say every 4 or 5 days you should check to see if this one needs more water. I don't think this one will easily rot. I heard people that just keep it in a denser mix and they water it a lot, and they even leave water in the plate and nothing really happens. It can also be grown in semi-hydroponics, but make sure that there is water in the reservoir. What I did notice, when it does dry out, the leaves will get quite wrinkly. The buds may fall off, especially if it's forming buds, or even the entire peduncle can fall off. And that happened to me, especially with the smaller one. It happened to me several times. And it did even happen in semi-hydroponics. I just didn't fill up the reservoir, the water was gone, and then it had peduncles, but they eventually fell off. In terms of fertilizer, I just used the regular orchid fertilizer for this one, or seaweed fertilizer. I fertilize every time I water, and then in winter I will just use the half-strength fertilizer Now, if you have a synthetic fertilizer, you may even need to use a milder dosage for that. In terms of humidity, I don't think this one is too challenging. I think it will do really good in lower humidity as well, but I would still go for medium humidity because hoyabella is very, very prone to spider mites. I had spider mites on the small one. I had spider mites on the large one. I didn't have any spider mites on the one that it's in semi-hydro, but I did deal with quite a lot of spider mites on this hoyabella. They're not too terrible to get rid of. I use paraffin oil with some dishwashing soap and then water. I would say I mix 2% strength. So for 100 milliliters of water, I will use 2 milliliters of paraffin oil and then some dish soap. I definitely think that a bit higher humidity helps keep spider mites at bay, and of course making sure it doesn't dry out, that will also help you. I did notice when you let it dry out for too long, it is more prone to spider mite attacks. The smell of the flowers is something that I really enjoy in this Hoya because it's not too strong, it's not too sweet. Even if it has more peduncles, if it has more buds, you will not really be able to smell it in your room. You really have to get close to it. You get your nose right into that flower and you will be able to smell it then. I would say towards the evening, around maybe 6 or 7 p.m. It reminds me of some flower that blooms in spring. I think maybe hyacinth or something like that. It does have a very mild smell, so I think you will enjoy it, and then it's not overpowering at all. Now in this mix you can see there is still a lot of perlite, but there is also a lot of peat and a lot of general potting mix, and there is just less bark. So this mix does hold on to moisture for a bit longer. It still dries out fairly quickly, but it's not like my other Hoya mixes where they just would dry out in maybe a couple of days. This one holds on to moisture a lot better, and that is because of the cocoa peat and then the general potting mix. And this Hoya is actually very common. It's very easy to find in a garden center, and it's not too expensive at all. So I would say this is a very, very good Hoya to start your journey with. It's a very good Hoya for beginner, and it is also a Hoya that will bloom for you very easily and very quickly. And once it starts blooming, it kind of tends to put out peduncles all the time, so it stays in bloom all the time. There are some other cultivars of hoyabella with white or yellow margins or with variegated leaves. Those are more difficult to come by and are a bit more expensive. There is also a hoyabella that has completely white flower, and that one is absolutely beautiful. I don't have any of those yet, but I do hope I get my hands on them as well. This was our hoyabella. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in our next 30 Days of Hoya.